out of individual struggles, they were born out of social struggles, and they were born out of extremely charged political moments in which questions of nation, nationalism, anti-nationalism were all up for grabs. So let's take back, in a way, the authorship of freedom of speech and expression, because ideals of free speech are not some abstract normative ideals that have been kind of created out of thin air. They are the products of extremely rooted local struggles like the one that is happening today. At the same time, I would warn you about relying in a way too much on the judiciary to be your savior. Because there is also equally a long history of the judiciary playing the role of creating, in a way, or recycling extremely conservative categories. After the 1992 Bombay riots, Joseph Bain D'Souza, the Chief Secretary of Bombay, filed a case against Bal Thackeray under Section 295A for the incitement of hatred. The matter went up to the Bombay High Court, and the proof was, of course, the articles that had been written by Thackeray. The court, in this case, in an extremely regressive judgment, made a distinction between ordinary Muslims and Muslims who are traitors, and said that the provision is about incitement of hatred against an entire community, but not against those members of the community who are traitors. There is, therefore, a real danger that in the given current political climate, when the debate around nationalism and anti-nationalism is so polarized, to rely solely on the courts as some kind of saviors of the right to dissent could also run the risk of creating, in a way, a judicial discourse of nationalism and anti-nationalism. So that's something we should keep in mind, just to say that one shouldn't rely on a juridical model of politics entirely. What I want to kind of, in a way, conclude with are some important questions that we all need to ask ourselves. Because while we're all absolutely clear on where we stand, in relation to this false question of the national, anti-national, and we're not engaging this in relation to the absolute loony right, over the last week, what I have also overheard, and in a number of conversations with ordinary people who you would consider to be extremely reasonable people, is a sense of being upset by what is happening in JNU. Now, of course, at one level, this is about, kind of countering the kind of media falsities that have been perpetuated. But at another level, what if indeed there are a large number of people who feel some kind of hurt, who feel some kind of an injury? How are we to reach out to them, to engage and to have a conversation with them? Where and to what extent do the slogans, the campaigns, the strategies that we currently have, to what extent are they, are they able to actually do this? How are we to think of more creative campaigns, more creative slogans that are actually able to converse with a large number of people? Because the greatest danger, I think, is to actually accept the polarization. Because the politics of sentiment, unfortunately, will always win and trump over the politics of reason. And we are relying entirely right now on the politics of reason. How may we bring a more intelligent politics of sentiment in the way that we lead our campaigns itself? The second thing that I want to think about is, if we began with the idea of the gadfly as a symbol of dissent, and as one of the most powerful metaphors in a way of the right to dissent, what we have in JNU is a swarm of gadflies. And how do we think about the way that the swarm moves in its contagion beyond the walls of JNU? JNU is already a safe space for the exercise of certain forms of speech. But what does it mean to be able to actually support initiatives that are happening in other universities? MS Baroda is facing, in a way, a very, very, very severe crisis posed by the right. In what ways can JNU move out to ensure that this swarm of gadflies that we have actually becomes a contagion across the country? One of the great things that the last 2 weeks has demonstrated, in a way, is that despite how politically bleak it is outside, there is a way in which people inside JNU, some people would say this is delusional, some people would say that this is romantic idealism, but there is a way in which a certain politics of hope that is practiced within JNU, in a way follows for me what one of the great dissenters of the 20th century, Vaclav Havel, had once said. Vaclav Havel, while in jail, had once written a very important tract in which he said, one has to lead one's life and one's politics as if. as if the conditions that do not allow us were not there, as if it were not impossible, as if we can get whatever we want to demand. And that's the only way in which one can actually have or practice a politics of impossible hope. Because for me, to be hopeful in these difficult times is not just foolishly romantic. It is also subversively and compassionately so. Because it is based on the fact that human history is not just a history of cruelty, but a history of compassion, of courage, and of kindness. Dissenters often have very, very tiny feet, but the little steps that they take are already, in a way, a marvelous victory over the political despair all around. So as you march on the streets of Delhi and on to Parliament in 2 or 3 days, remember that these tiny feet are the ones that are paving in some ways a much, much more radical idea of dissent in this country, which will finally do away with the law of sedition. Thank you.